Your fridge dies for 6 hours, and suddenly you're suspicious of everything. The milk gets sniffed twice. The leftovers get stared at like they may be hiding something. You hold your phone flashlight over a chicken breast like you're doing forensic work. 6 hours without cold, and the modern brain starts negotiating with dinner. Now imagine living your entire life without a refrigerator ever existing. Not broken, not temporarily out, not invented. For most of human history, if meat was going to last, people had to solve the problem some other way. And the first useful answer is simpler than it sounds. They did not always need to keep meat cold. They needed to make it harder for microbes to grow. Cold is one way to do that. It is not the only way. That matters because the easy explanation is that ancient people simply ate meat fast. Kill something, cook it, share it, finish it before it turns bad. And yes, sometimes that is exactly what happened. Fresh meat does not give you unlimited time, especially in warm conditions. But eat it immediately cannot explain everything. People traveled. They moved between camps. They crossed mountains. They went hunting for days at a time. They needed food that could survive longer than a fresh carcass. We even have a clue from one of the most famous ancient bodies ever found. In 1991, hikers in the Alps discovered a man frozen in the ice. Ötzi the Iceman. He died more than 5,000 years ago. Researchers later examined the contents of his stomach and found evidence of a heavy final meal that included ibex and red deer. Microscopic analysis suggested some of that meat may have been dried or only lightly heated before he ate it. That is a much stranger detail than it first sounds. We did not find his recipe. We found part of the evidence halfway through digestion, and it tells us something important. By Ötzi's time, people were not relying only on fresh meat eaten immediately salt, after smoke, cold, or some combination of them. Drying is the most obvious version. Cut meat into thinner pieces. Expose more surface. Let dry air, sun, or gentle heat pull moisture out. The meat gets smaller, tougher, darker, less friendly to microbial growth. It is not magic and it is not foolproof. Badly dried meat can still be unsafe. But if enough moisture is removed under the right conditions, shelf life changes completely. Smoking pushes the idea further. Hang meat above a low, smoky fire, and two things can happen at once. Heat and airflow help remove moisture. Smoke also deposits compounds on the surface that can slow some microbial activity. No one doing this thousands of years ago needed the phrase antimicrobial compound. They just needed to notice that meat treated one way lasted longer than meat treated another way. Salt attacks the same problem from a different direction. Salt lowers the amount of water available to microbes. That is one reason curing became so useful. And one reason salt became economically important in societies that needed to preserve food beyond the day it was killed. There are entire histories of trade built around salt. Interesting stories. But the important part here is simpler. If you can control moisture, you can change time. Fresh meat gives you a short window. Dry it, salt it, smoke it properly, and that window can get much longer. Humans kept finding different ways to stretch it. Sometimes very far. On the North American plains, indigenous peoples developed pemmican, made from dried meat combined with rendered fat, and sometimes berries. It was dense, portable, and under the right conditions, it could last for a very long time. That is not evidence for what Paleolithic humans were doing hundreds of thousands of years earlier. It is a later example of how powerful the same preservation logic can become once a culture refines it. And not every solution depends on reliable salt, cure, frozen landscape, use the coal that is already there. The environment changed. The goal did not. And now we get to the stranger question. None of these people knew what bacteria were. Nobody was checking water activity. Nobody was measuring microbial growth curves. Germ theory was still thousands of years away. So how did disconnected societies keep discovering methods that attacked the same invisible problem? Trial and error is part of the answer. But trial and error sounds much cleaner than it probably felt. Imagine the experiment. One batch lasts. Another smells wrong. One technique works in dry weather. The same technique fails during a wet season. Someone hangs meat too close to the fire and ruins it. Someone else cuts it thinner and notices it dries faster. A family uses more salt. Another starts smoking fish for longer. Nobody writes a paper. They just remember. Then they repeat what worked. That is cultural evolution in its least glamorous form. Keep the useful mistake. Drop the dangerous one. Teach the child before they have to discover it personally. Over enough generations, a practice can become very precise even when nobody understands the microscopic mechanism underneath it. And sometimes the explanation gets wrapped in tradition. Do it this way. Use this wood. Cut it this thin. Do not store it there. Wait this long. Maybe the original reason is forgotten. The rule survives anyway. That is useful because microorganisms do not care whether you understand them. They only care whether the conditions allow them to grow. Humans learned to manipulate those conditions long before they understood what they were manipulating. And once you notice that, preserved meat starts looking different. Jerky, bacon, salami, smoked salmon, cured tom. These foods are not modern inventions made possible by refrigeration. Many are descendants of preservation methods incredibly convenient because it slows microbial growth without turning every piece of meat into something dry, salty, smoky, frozen, fermented, or otherwise transformed. You can keep fresh food fresh. That is a luxury most humans never had. And it is why a 6-hour power outage feels so dramatic. Your whole food system is now built around the assumption that cold will quietly keep working. When that hum stops, the old problem comes back immediately. Not exactly the same problem. Modern food safety is more complicated than smells fine, probably fine, and you should not rely on ancient preservation instincts as a substitute for modern safety guidance. But the underlying biology has not changed. Microbes still care about temperature. They still care about water. They still care about salt, acidity, oxygen, and time. Your ancestors did not know any of those variables by name. They learned to push on them anyway. That is the real reveal. Ancient humans did not beat spoilage with one clever trick. They built a pile of imperfect methods. Drying removed available moisture. Smoking added another barrier. Salt changed the environment again. Cold helped where landscapes provided it. Culture carried the successful versions forward. And the methods kept improving because food that lasted longer was useful for travel, bad weather, migration, hunting, trade, and simple survival when the next meal was not guaranteed. So no, they did not need a refrigerator. But they absolutely needed preservation. And that distinction matters. The refrigerator feels like the solution because it is the solution you inherited. To them, the solution was a process. Cut it, dry it, smoke it, salt it, freeze it, store it correctly, wait, check, repeat. No electricity, no germ theory, just generations of people noticing which food made it to tomorrow. And that brings us back to your dead fridge. 6 hours without cold feels like civilizati.